He's a very honest man and a very generous man. Those are the two things that hit me, because when we worked together...
Paul Newman and Robert Redford were Hollywood's golden duo. But after Newman's death, his words exposed shocking truths. Behind the smiles were rivalry, ambition, and wounds hidden for decades. Were the rumors about Redford's loyalty true? And how did Newman really feel about their bond? Join us as we uncover the secrets finally revealed. The public friendship and the golden era of Hollywood. Hollywood in the 1960s and 1970s was changing fast. The old studio system that once controlled every step of an actor's career was beginning to lose its grip, while a new kind of star power was rising. This was the age of independent directors, daring scripts, and a stronger focus on personalities that could carry entire films. Audiences wanted to see more than just stories. They wanted to see stars who felt real, human, and exciting. Out of this change grew the buddy film, a genre where the bond between two central characters carried as much weight as the plot itself. These films worked because viewers enjoyed the energy that came when two strong actors shared the screen as equals. The golden era of buddy films was beginning, and Paul Newman and Robert Redford soon became its most famous faces. Paul Newman had already built his reputation before this partnership began. By the mid-1960s, he was not just a movie star but a cultural icon. He had starred in classics like The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke, showing a mix of charm, wit, and toughness that made him appealing to both men and women. He was admired for his piercing blue eyes, but he was more than just looks. His performances carried depth, and critics respected his ability to play both rebels and complex heroes. Off-screen, Newman was seen as grounded and generous, known for his passion for auto racing, and later for his charitable ventures. By the time Robert Redford entered the scene, Newman had already secured his place as one of Hollywood's most respected figures. Robert Redford, on the other hand, was a rising star. In the early part of his career, he took roles in television before breaking through with film performances in Inside Daisy Clover and Barefoot in the Park. His good looks and natural charm quickly made him a favorite with younger audiences. By the late 1960s, he was gaining momentum and was ready for a project that could cement his status. What made Redford stand out was not only his appearance but also his ambition. He had a keen interest in shaping his own career and later expanded his work to directing and creating platforms for independent filmmakers. But at this time, he was still building his reputation, and his pairing with Newman became the moment that changed everything. That change arrived with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969. The film paired Newman as Butch Cassidy with Redford as the Sundance Kid. Their chemistry was instant and undeniable. The story of two charming outlaws on the run captured the imagination of audiences around the world. It was not just the action or the humor that worked, but the way Newman and Redford played off each other. They seemed natural, as though they had been friends for years. Their banter felt effortless, their camaraderie real, and their differences in style only made the partnership stronger. Newman's calm confidence and Redford's cool intensity blended into something magical. The movie became a massive success, one of the most beloved films of its time, and it set a new standard for the buddy film genre. 4 years later, they reunited for The Sting in 1973, and once again the results were extraordinary. This film, set in the world of con men during the Great Depression, was a critical and commercial triumph. The slick style, clever plot, and the playful partnership between Newman and Redford made it an instant classic. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture and further solidified their reputation as Hollywood's golden duo. By this point, the idea of Newman and Redford together had become larger than life. Hollywood recognized the power of their partnership and leaned into it heavily. The two men appeared on magazine covers, were interviewed together, and made joint appearances at events. Publicists carefully presented them as close friends off-screen, mirroring their on-screen personas. They joked together, smiled for cameras, and gave audiences exactly what they wanted: the image of two men bound by brotherhood. Yet behind this carefully built narrative, small cracks were forming. Hollywood thrives on image, and sometimes that image can overshadow private truths. While the public saw laughter, support, and brotherhood, the reality was far more complicated. And this is where the story begins to turn, because once the bright lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, whispers started to grow about whether the perfect friendship was truly what it seemed. The birth of rumors. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid became a hit, the aftermath was immediate. The movie was more than just a box office success. It was a cultural event. Audiences talked about it everywhere, critics praised the pairing, and Hollywood quickly realized it had struck gold. But with great success often comes rivalry, and soon the conversation shifted from celebration to comparison. Fans began to argue over which of the two men was the bigger star. Some believed Paul Newman, with his long career and string of hits, was the true anchor of their success. Others pointed to Robert Redford, claiming his youthful energy and growing popularity were what gave the duo their spark. This debate did not end quickly. Instead, it fueled a divide among audiences, with each actor gaining his own loyal following. Industry insiders added fuel to the fire. Behind closed doors, people in Hollywood whispered about creative tension. Newman was already a household name with decades of experience, while Redford was just beginning to claim his spot at the top. This imbalance created an easy story for gossip, that Newman resented Redford's rise, or that Redford felt limited by Newman's established power. While neither man admitted to such feelings publicly, the idea of rivalry made too much sense for people to ignore. Rumors began to focus on billing and credit. In Hollywood, the order of names on posters and in credits is a big deal, and stories circulated about negotiations over who would be listed first. In some accounts, Newman was said to expect top billing as the senior star, while others suggested that Redford's rapid popularity made studios push for equal treatment. These details, whether exaggerated or not, gave tabloids the perfect storyline. Two friends smiling on camera but competing behind the scenes. The contrast in their personalities also fed the gossip. Newman was often described as calm, measured, and modest. He kept his private life relatively quiet and was known for his loyalty to his family. Redford, by comparison, was ambitious and outspoken, especially about politics and social issues. He was not shy about using his platform to discuss larger causes, and he showed a clear drive to expand beyond acting into directing and producing. To observers, these differences created tension. One man was steady and grounded, the other restless and determined to push boundaries. The media loved these contrasts and ran with them. Articles speculated about jealousy, disagreements, and competition. While some stories were likely exaggerated, many carried small truths, and while the public clung to the dream of brotherhood, the question never went away. Was it all too good to be true? Robert Redford's ambition and career maneuvers. Robert Redford's career took off in a remarkable way after his pairing with Paul Newman. The huge success of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969 made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars almost overnight. Before that film, Redford was seen as promising, but afterward, he became a leading man who could carry a blockbuster. His natural charisma, golden looks, and ability to balance seriousness with charm made him one of the most appealing actors of the 1970s. By the time The Sting arrived in 1973, Redford had fully cemented his place in Hollywood. The movie became a massive hit, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture and giving him even greater exposure. From that point, he was not just Paul Newman's partner in film, but a standalone powerhouse. Studios wanted him, audiences loved him, and critics respected his range. This momentum allowed him to shape his career in bold ways. Unlike Newman, who largely stayed focused on acting and philanthropy, Redford began to move behind the camera. In 1980, he directed Ordinary People, a family drama that stunned Hollywood by winning the Academy Award for Best Picture and earning Redford the award for Best Director. This shift showed his ambition and vision, marking him as not just a movie star, but a serious filmmaker. Later, he directed other acclaimed projects such as Quiz Show in 1994, which explored issues of corruption and integrity. While Newman used his fame to support charity, Redford used his to build an institution that changed the industry. This ambition, however, may have contributed to the quiet distance between him and Newman. As Redford pursued his own empire, stories surfaced that he occasionally sidelined Newman. Some accounts suggest that opportunities where both men might have worked together instead became solo projects for Redford. While Newman continued to act in major films and remained beloved, Redford's career path increasingly took him into spaces where Newman did not follow. The balance between them shifted, and the friendship that once seemed equal in the eyes of the public started to feel less so behind the scenes. For example, as Redford became more involved in the Sundance movement, his name became linked to the future of cinema. Newman, by contrast, became more closely associated with his food brand and philanthropic projects. Both were admirable, but they existed in different worlds. Some observers began to note that Redford received more credit for shaping the direction of film, while Newman was seen as maintaining a steady, quieter legacy. This imbalance was especially striking when people look back on their shared roles in Hollywood's buddy film era. Many remembered Newman as the established star who helped launch Redford into greater fame. Yet over time, Redford was often celebrated as the visionary who pushed boundaries, while Newman's contribution was framed more as tradition and stability. This shift in credit may have been difficult for Newman, who valued loyalty and equality in friendship. Redford's career maneuvers reflect the nature of his personality. He was ambitious, determined, and not afraid to take risks. This made him a trailblazer, but it also meant that he sometimes moved ahead without looking back. For Newman, whose life was guided by loyalty and humility, this difference could have felt like a betrayal of the bond they once shared so closely. The friendship in public versus private reality. The bond between Paul Newman and Robert Redford was one of the most admired friendships in Hollywood. On the surface, they seemed inseparable. Two charismatic actors who had created unforgettable moments on screen and appeared side by side at award shows, charity events, and red carpet premieres. Their smiles, playful exchanges, and mutual admiration seemed to show the world that their connection was as strong in real life as it was in their films. However, as is often the case in Hollywood, the story was more complicated when the cameras were not rolling. Publicly, their friendship was built into the fabric of their careers. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the image of Newman and Redford as the golden duo helped sell films, magazines, and even promotional campaigns. Hollywood executives understood that together they symbolized an ideal brotherhood. Newman represented maturity, stability, and experience, while Redford embodied youthful ambition, political edge, and rising stardom. Together they fit a narrative that audiences adored. To keep this alive, both men worked hard to maintain appearances, even when tensions bubbled beneath the surface. Behind the smiles, there were hints of strain that close observers noticed. In interviews, the way they occasionally deflected questions about one another or their pauses before praising each other revealed a subtle distance. Photographs sometimes caught moments where one looked less engaged while the other spoke. None of this suggested open hostility, but it hinted that their bond was not as smooth as it was sold to the public. The first area where cracks appeared was financial negotiations. Salary disputes were common in Hollywood, especially when two stars of equal magnitude worked on the same project. Newman, by the late 1960s, was already a respected leading man with major hits like The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke under his belt. Redford, though immensely popular after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, was still climbing. As his fame skyrocketed, his agents pushed for paychecks that matched Newman's, or in some cases, surpassed them. This created situations where one of them might feel undervalued, and the studios often used these rivalries as leverage. Another recurring point of conflict was billing order, whose name would appear first on posters, in trailers, and in opening credits. In an industry where ego and status were constantly measured, billing order could influence an actor's future opportunities. Reports from industry insiders suggested that Newman and Redford sometimes disagreed over this issue. Newman, older and more established, often expected top billing, while Redford's growing fame made him push for equal or higher placement. Though these disputes rarely went public, they shaped the private tension between them. Creative differences also played a role. Both Newman and Redford had distinct ideas about the kinds of films they wanted to make. Newman preferred character-driven stories and often gravitated toward projects with social messages, while Redford especially as he moved into producing and directing, was drawn to larger, sometimes riskier narratives that could push boundaries. On projects where they collaborated or were in discussions to collaborate, their differing visions sometimes clashed. Friends and colleagues later admitted that disagreements over script directions, themes, and casting created uncomfortable situations that were kept away from public view. Despite these private conflicts, the public image of their friendship was carefully protected. Smiles, jokes, and warmth were displayed whenever cameras were present. Both men understood that the power of their brand as a duo benefited them greatly, not only financially, but also in cultural legacy. Hollywood had few partnerships that matched theirs in popularity, and tarnishing that image could hurt both their reputations. As a result, they often set aside their personal frustrations to deliver what the public expected, a perfect friendship. Yet years later, Newman admitted through posthumous reflections that the cracks in the relationship were real. While he never portrayed Redford as an enemy, he acknowledged that their bond was far from the idealized picture Hollywood painted. The public may have adored the idea of them as brothers, but the reality was layered with rivalry, unspoken disappointments, and personal differences that never fully healed. This contrast between what was seen on screen and what truly existed behind the curtain reveals a deeper truth about Hollywood. Even the brightest friendships can be complicated by fame, business, and ambition. Newman and Redford were not immune to these forces. The stage was now set for something even more dramatic, the surfacing of specific rumors and private grievances that Newman would later confirm, leaving audiences stunned and reshaping the way their friendship was remembered. The specific rumors confirmed. For decades, Hollywood insiders whispered about hidden tensions between Paul Newman and Robert Redford. While both men carefully protected their public image, the rumors never fully disappeared. They ranged from stories of competition for roles to suggestions of personal betrayal. Most were dismissed as exaggerated gossip, but after Newman's death in 2008, materials he left behind began to confirm that not all of these whispers were untrue. One of the clearest claims Newman made was about Redford's ambition. Newman respected talent and hard work, but he felt that Redford often prioritized his personal fame over their friendship. This perception did not stem from a single incident, but from a series of small moments where Redford's decisions seemed to distance him from Newman. For instance, when Redford moved heavily into directing and producing in the late 1970s and 1980s, he often pursued projects independently, rather than seeking collaboration with Newman. While this was a natural step for Redford's career, Newman interpreted it as a sign that their bond was not as valued as the public had been led to believe. Redford's competitive streak was another source of friction. Friends and colleagues had long described Redford as ambitious, a man who wanted to build a lasting legacy both on screen and behind the camera. This ambition fueled extraordinary achievements, such as founding the Sundance Institute in 1981 and the Sundance Film Festival, which became one of the most important platforms for independent cinema. However, to Newman, this same drive created distance between them. Redford's expanding empire in Hollywood made Newman feel overshadowed, particularly since Newman chose to focus more on acting and charity rather than empire building. There were also whispers of specific betrayals tied to business and film deals. Industry talk suggested that Newman was passed over for projects where Redford either had influence or ended up thriving. While some of these may have been normal outcomes of Hollywood competition, the pattern left Newman with a sense of being edged out by a man once considered his closest ally. These incidents added weight to the narrative of rivalry, even though they were rarely acknowledged directly in public at the time. Another sensitive issue was Redford's support, or lack thereof, for Newman's charitable work. Newman poured enormous energy into philanthropy, most famously through Newman's Own, which donated all profits to charity. While Redford respected this work, he did not involve himself as deeply as Newman might have hoped. To Newman, this lack of support from someone branded as his brother added to the disappointment. It was not that Redford opposed the causes, but rather that he chose not to share in them at the same level, reinforcing the sense of distance between the two men. In confirming these rumors, Newman did not express hatred toward Redford. Instead, his words revealed hurt, regret, and a recognition that their friendship was not as solid as the world believed. He acknowledged that Redford's actions, while not malicious, had left him feeling betrayed by someone he had once trusted deeply. The pain came not from open conflict, but from the quiet realization that their paths had diverged, and that the closeness they presented in public was never fully real in private. This confirmation reshaped the way fans and historians looked at their relationship. For decades, the Newman-Redford duo was held up as the gold standard of Hollywood brotherhood. To learn that beneath the surface there was rivalry, distance, and disappointment forced audiences to reconsider the myth. It did not erase their achievements or the magic they created together, but it revealed the human side of two men caught between friendship and ambition. As these revelations came to light, they added a new dimension to the legacy of Newman and Redford. Beyond the rumors and the confirmations lay a larger question. What happened to their relationship in its final years, and how did time, aging, and reflection shape the way these two men truly felt about each other? That is where the next part of their journey unfolds. Why Paul Newman stayed silent in life. Paul Newman lived much of his life with dignity, restraint, and a strong sense of personal responsibility. While Hollywood thrived on gossip, rivalries, and scandal, Newman often stood apart as a man who avoided unnecessary drama. When it came to his complicated friendship with Robert Redford, he carried many private disappointments, but he rarely allowed them to reach the public eye. The reasons he stayed silent during his lifetime reveal a man who valued peace over conflict, legacy over bitterness, and respect over spectacle. One of the most important reasons for Newman's silence was the fear of creating a scandal that could damage both legacies. By the time Newman and Redford became household names, they were already seen as an iconic duo. Their work together in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting had shaped the way audiences thought about friendship on screen. If Newman had publicly criticized Redford or confirmed the darker rumors about their relationship, it would have undermined the magic that millions of fans held dear. Newman understood how powerful that image was, and he knew that tearing it down could have left a lasting scar not only on Redford's reputation, but also on his own. Another factor was Newman's natural desire to avoid unnecessary drama. He had little patience for gossip or feuds, and he disliked being dragged into stories that could overshadow his work. Unlike many celebrities who used public disagreements to fuel attention, Newman saw such behavior as undignified. To him, speaking openly about private tensions would not solve anything. Instead, it would create noise, attract sensational headlines, and feed tabloids. By choosing silence, he kept control over his public persona and protected himself from the chaos that often consumed other stars. Newman also respected the fans who cherished the idea of his bond with Redford. Audiences loved to believe that their on-screen friendship reflected reality, and Newman did not want to disappoint them. He had always shown gratitude toward the people who supported his career, and he felt a responsibility to give them the joy and comfort they expected from his story. Revealing that his friendship with Redford was strained might have left many fans disillusioned, and Newman did not want to cause that kind of disappointment. Protecting families was another reason Newman kept quiet. Both he and Redford had families who lived in the shadow of their fame. A public feud could have drawn unwanted attention to their loved ones and put them in difficult positions. Newman valued privacy deeply, especially for those closest to him, and he likely felt that speaking out would only harm the people he most wanted to shield. Newman's lifelong reputation for dignity also played a central role. He had built an image as a man of integrity, someone who cared more about doing the right thing than chasing attention. Remaining silent fit this image perfectly. Instead of airing grievances or exposing rivalries, he chose the quiet road. Silence became a way of demonstrating maturity and self-control, even when he might have felt anger or sadness. It was only after his death that Newman's words began to surface through diaries, letters, or memoirs. This timing was no accident. By waiting until after his passing, Newman could finally express his truth without worrying about consequences. He could be honest without fear of scandal, backlash, or hurting those who still lived. Death freed him from the burden of silence, allowing him to release emotions that he had carried for decades. This choice also reflects a broader human truth. Many people wait until after death to reveal personal stories or unresolved conflicts. In life, they fear judgment, pain, or disruption. After death, there are no longer direct consequences, and honesty can be shared without the risk of harm. For Newman, this posthumous revelation was both a catharsis and a final act of control. He left behind his version of events, ensuring that history would not only remember the polished surface, but also the reality underneath. His silence in life then was not weakness, but a deliberate decision. Newman balanced loyalty to his image, care for others, and his own preference for peace. Only when the time was right, when he could no longer be touched by scandal or hurt, did he allow the truth to come forward. And when that truth finally surfaced, Hollywood was stunned. The carefully protected story of a perfect brotherhood between Newman and Redford was shattered, leaving fans and critics scrambling to understand what had really happened behind the smiles. Hollywood's reaction to the revelation. When Paul Newman's reflections about his complicated friendship with Robert Redford came to light after his passing, the entertainment world was shaken. For decades, the image of their partnership had been untouchable. They were celebrated as one of the most beloved duos in Hollywood history, remembered for their chemistry, their charisma, and their ability to make audiences believe in friendship. The revelation that Newman carried private disappointments and felt overshadowed by Redford changed everything. The initial reaction was one of shock. Newspapers, magazines, and television outlets quickly covered the story, highlighting how unexpected it was. Documentaries and retrospectives began revisiting Newman and Redford's work with fresh eyes, searching for clues that might have been missed before. Clips of interviews were re-examined, with body language experts pointing to subtle signs of tension. The new context made familiar images look different, as if the truth had been hiding in plain sight. Fans reacted with a mix of emotions. Some felt sadness, believing that the friendship they had admired for decades had not been as genuine as they thought. For them, the myth of the perfect Hollywood brotherhood was shattered. Others felt a sense of betrayal, as though they had been misled by carefully curated publicity. Yet there were also many who understood Newman's perspective, seeing his honesty as a natural part of life's complexities. Friendships, they reasoned, are rarely perfect, and even legends like Newman and Redford were human beings who experienced disappointment and rivalry. Attention also turned to Redford's possible response. At first, he offered little in the way of public comment. His silence was read in different ways. Some saw it as dignified restraint, while others interpreted it as avoidance. When he did speak in interviews around the time of Newman's death, Redford focused on celebrating their work together and honoring Newman's legacy, choosing not to engage with the revelations directly. Whether this was a sign of respect or a strategy to protect his own reputation, it left room for speculation. The narrative of their relationship shifted significantly. No longer was it simply the tale of two actors who embodied brotherhood on screen. Instead, it became a layered story of rivalry, wounds, and unspoken truths. Historians and film critics began to frame their partnership as a study in contrasts. Newman, the humble philanthropist who avoided conflict, and Redford, the ambitious builder of an empire. Their bond was now seen not as flawless but as complicated, fragile, and deeply human. Biographers added further commentary, suggesting that the revelations did not diminish Newman's greatness but rather enhanced his humanity. They argued that his willingness to finally share his hurt made him more relatable. Film historians also pointed out that the cracks in their friendship reflected broader changes in Hollywood itself, where collaboration often gave way to competition, and personal ambition could strain even the strongest of bonds. The entertainment industry, which had long used Newman and Redford as a symbol of enduring friendship, had to adjust to this new reality. Studios and networks re-examined how they presented celebrity partnerships, recognizing that behind polished images, there were often more complicated truths. For younger generations of actors and filmmakers, the story served as a reminder that even legendary relationships are not immune to rivalry and disappointment. Despite the shock, one thing remained clear: the legacy of Newman and Redford's work endured. Their films continued to be celebrated, and their on-screen magic was not diminished by the revelations. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.